Unit 1, Psychology, Happiness, page 3. Build your vocabulary. 1.
If you want to achieve good grades in school, you need to study hard.
2.
Rosa has several characteristics of a good student. For example, she is intelligent, hardworking, and enjoys learning new things.
3.
Children have a strong connection to their parents. They need their parents and don't want to be separated from them.
4.
We gathered data about our class. We wrote down everyone's age, gender, and hometown.
5.
I set a goal for myself. I want to go to graduate school and become a psychologist.
6.
I feel a lot of gratitude toward my parents. I'm thankful for what they've done for me.
7.
Jawad has a good income. He has enough money to buy a house and live comfortably.
8.
To check a child's health, doctors usually measure the child's height and weight. They want to make sure the child's size is normal and healthy.
9.
One method psychologists use to help unhappy people is to talk to them. Another is to give them medicine.
10.
You can see a child's personality at a young age. Some children are quiet and shy, while others are outgoing and friendly.
11.
I'm getting a degree in math. I don't need to study psychology because it isn't relevant to my major.
12.
A graduate degree is a requirement for becoming a psychology professor. You must have it in order to teach at a university.
13.
My professor is doing research on the psychology of happiness. She's studying happy people to find out what makes them happy.
14.
She has many strengths that help her to be a good psychologist. For example, she works well with other people and likes to learn new things.
Unit 1, Psychology, Happiness, page 5. Try it out.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about positive psychology. First, I want to start with the definition of positive psychology. After that, we'll look at the goals of positive psychology, what positive psychologists are trying to learn. Finally, we're going to discuss some research done by positive psychologists. So, is everyone clear on the topic?
Unit 1, Psychology, Happiness, pages 6 and 7. Listen for main ideas and listen for details.
Good morning, everybody. Today, I want to get started with the main topic of this course, happiness. First, I want to talk about how psychologists like myself measure happiness. Then, we'll look at some common characteristics of happy people. And finally, we'll look at whether or not we can change our level of happiness. In other words, whether we can learn to be happier. Okay, so we all know what it's like to feel happy, right? But how do we measure happiness? One common method psychologists use is interviewing people. First, we ask them questions to find out how happy they are, how happy they feel in general. Then, we gather information about them, like their age, health, income, and so on. We use all of this data to determine the most common characteristics of happy people. So, what have psychologists learned? Well, there are a few characteristics we know are not relevant to happiness. One of them is having a lot of money. As long as people have enough money for a home, food, and clothing, having more money doesn't make people happier. So money doesn't buy happiness. Are you surprised? Another thing that is not connected to happiness is having more education. People with a lot of education are no happier than people with little education. So now maybe you're questioning your decision to take this class, huh? Finally, a third characteristic that is not a requirement for happiness is youth, being young. In fact, the opposite is true. One study found that 60 to 64-year-olds are actually happier than 20 to 24-year-olds. So, we know that money, education, and youth are not important to happiness. Then what is? Well, there's no one way to achieve happiness, but there are a few specific characteristics that happy people have in common. One very important characteristic is family and friends. A study of students at the University of Illinois found that the happiest students had strong connections to family and friends, and that they made time to spend with them. Another common feature of happy people is that they have religious beliefs or a belief in something bigger than themselves. This helps them feel that life has significance or meaning. A third important thing about happy people is that they set goals for themselves. In the workplace or in their personal lives, they establish goals around things they find interesting or things that allow them to use their strengths. Now, another question psychologists have tried to resolve is, can we change how happy we are? Can we learn to be happier? Some psychologists think the answer is no, we can't. This is because research shows that happiness depends a lot on our personality, the kind of person we are. Some people just have more positive attitudes about life than others. We've all noticed this, right? And because it's difficult for people to change their personalities, some psychologists think that we stay at about the same level of happiness throughout our lives. But many of us in the field of positive psychology believe we can change, that we can consciously learn to be happier. Positive psychologists have developed some exercises that people can do to feel happier. One of these is called the gratitude visit. In this exercise, people write a letter to someone they want to thank. For example, a parent, a friend, a teacher, someone they feel has helped them in their life. But they don't send the letter. Instead, they visit the person and read the letter to them. Now, research shows this really works to make the person who wrote the letter feel happier. Why? First, it helps them feel more connected to others. And remember, that is very important for happiness. Second, the people are giving something, in this case, their thanks to someone else. And giving or helping others makes us feel better about ourselves. It helps us feel that our lives have meaning. In addition to the gratitude visit, psychologists have developed other exercises that help people focus on the positive things in their lives and help them use their strengths to achieve goals. And studies have shown that these exercises can help people feel better. However, they do have limits. For one thing, each exercise only works for a certain amount of time. For example, the gratitude visit only makes people happier for about 3 months. And of course, we can't become a lot happier. Remember, we can't totally change our personalities. You can't take a really unhappy, negative person and make him or her feel super happy all the time. But I do believe that if we really want to, we can all learn ways to feel better, to feel the best that we can. And you're going to find this out for yourselves. For the next time, I'd like you to look into choosing your own happiness exercise.
Unit 1, Psychology, Happiness, page 8. Talk about the topic. Parts A and B.
I think this class is going to be really fun. I mean, we're studying happiness.
Yeah, I know what you mean. This is a cool topic.
Maybe the ideas from this course can completely change people's lives. Like, maybe I'll become happier.
Really? I don't think so. I don't think these ideas can really work. I mean, we're either happy people or we're not, like she said.
Yeah, exactly. Like, did you guys get the gratitude visit? I mean, is that really gonna make you happier for, how long did she say?
3 months.
I doubt it. Maybe like a week, but then you're yourself again.
I'm sorry, I don't agree. I think a really positive experience can stay with you a long time. Like I said, it can change your life.
But don't forget, not all psychologists believe you can learn to be happier. Do you have that in your notes?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess I'm just a positive thinker.
Unit 2, Linguistics, A Time to Learn, page 13. Build your vocabulary.
There are several different theories about how people learn language, but no one really knows how language acquisition happens.
This semester, I'm taking an English language class. Next year, I'm going to Australia, so I have a lot of motivation to study. English is a critical skill that I need to learn before my trip.
During the first year of life, babies go through a period called babbling. During this time, the baby makes sounds but can't say words yet. Linguists think that babbling plays an important role in language learning.
Why do so many people study English? There are many factors that make it a popular subject. One obvious reason is for education. Many students need to study textbooks that are in English.
I think that living in another country is the ideal way to learn a new language. You're in an environment where you have to speak the language all the time, so your brain begins to take in the new language.
Track 9, Unit 2, Linguistics, A Time to Learn, page 15. Try it out.
In this class, we're going to look at how people learn language. First, let's talk about babies. How do babies learn language? Well, they learn by hearing language around them. They're ready to learn language at birth. Parents don't have to teach babies how to talk, not like we're taught to read and write in school. No, we just talk to a baby, and the baby will learn. Now, you may wonder, why do babies learn so easily? Well, that's a very interesting question.
Track 10, Unit 2, Linguistics, A Time to Learn, pages 16 and 17. Listen for main ideas and listen for details.
Now, let me ask, how many of you have studied a new language, not the language you grew up speaking? All right, okay. Well, today we're going to look at second language acquisition. That is, learning a second language. And one question that linguists like myself have tried to answer for many years is, why is it considerably easier for kids to learn a second language than adults? And we're going to look at a few different theories about this. First, we'll look at a theory that says there's a critical period or phase or ideal time in life for language learning. And then we'll talk about other factors such as the learning environment, attitude, and motivation. Now, from the show of hands, I see that many of you have had your own personal experience with language learning, and I have recently too. I started studying Mandarin Chinese, Putonghua, this last year. And so I've been going to class, listening to language CDs, and I'm learning, but it's tough. It's tough to learn a new language. And then today I went into my son's class, and he's in first grade now, and one of my son's friends, Jiwei, he goes by Stephen now, he just moved here last fall from China. And when he first came into the class, he didn't speak a word of English. I mean, not one word. But now he's talking away in English, not always perfectly, but very easily, very fluent. And I'm like, wow, I mean, this is so unfair. We've both been studying a new language for the same amount of time, but he's learning it so much more quickly. And this is, in fact, something that linguists are very interested in, understanding this difference between how kids and adults learn a new language. Now, one explanation is that there's a critical period for language learning. And this theory was first introduced in the 1960s by a linguist named Eric Lenneberg. And Lenneberg's theory says that during childhood, language learning is very easy. Basically, our brains are just ready for language learning. But later, starting in adolescence and as we get older, our brains change. We lose this childhood ability, and it becomes more difficult to learn language. And that's why adults have trouble learning a new language. Well, and if you're an adult, that's a bit discouraging, right? You can look at my son's friend Stephen, who's 6 years old, and me, who's 29 plus, and say, well, okay, Stephen is still in the critical phase. His brain works perfectly right now for language learning, but you're way past the critical phase, and your brain's already changed. So too bad, I'm sorry. But wait a minute, is this comparison between me and Stephen really fair? I mean, there's an age difference, but there are a lot of other differences as well. Can we really say that my lack of progress learning Chinese is only because I've passed the critical phase? No. Many people, including linguist Robert de Keyser, would say no, you have to look at other factors. Okay. Now, one obvious factor in second language acquisition is environment, the place where the person is learning. So Stephen is here in an all-English environment where he's speaking English all day at school, and all of his friends speak English. Me, on the other hand, I'm just taking a class 2 hours a week. So sure, I listen to my Chinese CDs in my car on the way to work, but other than that, I'm not in an environment where I hear a lot of Chinese. And I wonder, what if it were the other way around? What if I went to China and was in school all day hearing Chinese? And Stephen was studying English only 2 hours a week. Do you think that would change how well we were each learning the language? Yeah, I'm sure it would. So environment plays a significant role in language acquisition. Another factor in second language acquisition is a person's attitude about learning the new language. How do you feel about learning? Now, when I was watching Stephen in the classroom playing with his friends, it was clear he didn't feel at all embarrassed about his English language abilities. He can't speak perfectly yet, but when he made a mistake, he didn't care. Neither did his friends. They just kept on playing. Me, on the other hand, I find it very difficult to speak Chinese when I'm not sure what I'm saying. I get very nervous and embarrassed, and as a result, I don't practice speaking as much as I should. So clearly, a person's attitude about learning is very important in acquiring a second language. Finally, the last factor we'll look at is motivation. Okay, why is the person learning the language? Now, Stephen is probably very motivated to learn English. All his friends speak it, so he needs to learn it in order to play with them. I, on the other hand, want to learn Chinese, but I don't need to. So we're both motivated to learn, but perhaps my motivation isn't quite as strong. All right, so what do we understand about second language acquisition? Well, there does seem to be a critical period in childhood when language learning is much easier, but it's important to look at all the factors, and there are several, including environment, attitude, and motivation, which help decide if someone is going to be a successful language learner. As for me, I'm not ready to give up on Chinese just yet.
Unit 2, Linguistics, A Time to Learn, page 18. Talk about the topic, parts A and B.
Okay, so what does everyone think about this critical period theory? Like, the big thing is that it's harder to learn a language if you're an adult, right?
Actually, speaking from my own experience, I'd say the other factors he mentioned are just as important.
What other factors?
Well, attitude, environment, and motivation. Those were big for me.
Really? How so? Like, what was your experience like?
Oh, okay. Well, I came to the United States from Russia as a teenager, and every time I spoke, I got so nervous. I was afraid people would make fun of me.
Oh, really? I thought kids learned easily.
Well, I was in high school, so a little older. Anyway, I made some friends, I watched a lot of TV, and now I feel pretty comfortable talking to anyone.
Good.
Eamon, what about you? What was it like for you?
Oh, well, to me, the critical period explains a lot. My niece, who's 4, came over here when I did, 2 years ago. And she sounds like you guys.
Really?
She talks like a native speaker, and I'm so jealous.
Well, you'll get there. You know, it's just a matter of time and
definitely.
practice.
I mean, for 2 years, you sound good, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry about it.
Unit 3, Public Health, Sleep, page 23. Build your vocabulary. 1.
Health problems can affect every aspect of your life. They can affect your level of happiness, your success in school or at work, and your relationships.
2.
Feeling tired in the morning is a consequence of going to bed late.
3.
I can't function if I don't get enough sleep. I have trouble thinking the next day.
4.
Taking the sleeping pills had an immediate effect. I fell asleep in 10 minutes.
5.
Staying up late last night had an impact on me today. I've been very tired all day.
6.
I injured myself when I fell down the stairs, and now my foot hurts when I walk.
7.
There is a link between cigarette smoking and cancer. Smoking causes cancer.
8.
Older people are more likely than other adults to have sleep problems. They have more trouble falling asleep and wake up more often in the night.
9.
50% of teenagers say they don't sleep enough. That's 1 out of every 2.
10.
I realized I was tired when I fell asleep on the bus and missed my stop. Before that happened, I'd thought I was getting enough sleep.
11.
My father works the night shift from 11 p.m. until 8 a.m. and sleeps during the day.
12.
Sleep deprivation is a serious problem. Without enough rest, people become sick.
13.
I suffer from serious headaches. My head hurts for hours and I can't go to work.
Unit 3, Public Health, Sleep, page 25. Try it out.
First, let's start with the sleep habits of children. Children need much more sleep than adults. For instance, Newborn babies, babies just 1 to 3 months old, need up to 16 hours of sleep each day. They need sleep to grow and for their brains to develop. So it's clear that sleep is very important for young babies. Okay, next thing.
Unit 3, Public Health, Sleep, pages 26 and 27. Listen for main ideas and listen for details.
How many of you got enough sleep last night? Oh, not so many. Okay. Well, that's what we're going to cover today, the issue of sleep deprivation, not getting enough sleep. Now, you might say, sleep deprivation? Why is this a public health problem? In fact, there are many serious consequences of not getting enough sleep. So we'll first look at the immediate impact, problems that it causes in your daily life, and then we'll look at the long-term effects, problems that grow over many months or years, especially concerning our health. Let's start with the definition of sleep deprivation. Most adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night. So if you get less than 7 hours of sleep on most nights, you'll start suffering from sleep deprivation. Lack of sleep has serious effects on the brain, on our ability to think and to function properly. Without a sufficient amount of sleep, we think more slowly. We have trouble making decisions. We make more mistakes and have trouble remembering things. So basically, anything to do with memory, making decisions, thinking, all of these are affected by the lack of sleep. And this is happening to many people. Recent studies show that 40% of adults get less than 7 hours of sleep each night. So that means 4 out of 10 adults are suffering from sleep deprivation. So let's talk about the immediate effect of not getting enough sleep and how it can affect us in every aspect of our lives. For instance, at school. How many of you have stayed up all night to study for a big test? Well, research shows that in order for us to remember new information, we first need to sleep. It's interesting, right? Sleep assists our memory. So when we sleep, we consolidate and we strengthen our long-term memory. So if you don't sleep enough, learning is harder. In fact, some studies have shown a connection between the amount of sleep students get and their grades in school. Students who get less sleep get lower grades. Now let's think about work. On the job, sleepy workers cause many workplace accidents. One example is in the medical field. Doctors in hospitals often have to put in long shifts and stay up all night. One recent study looked at doctors who stayed awake all night working 30-hour shifts. It showed that these tired doctors were 7 times more likely to make mistakes on these long shifts than on regular shifts when they got enough sleep. 7 times. These mistakes injured people and even killed patients. Another place where the immediate effects of sleep deprivation is illustrated is on the road, in car accidents. Did you know that tired drivers cause 20% of car accidents in the US? That's about 1,500 deaths and more than 7,000 injuries each year. Many of these accidents occur when tired drivers fall into microsleep, which is falling asleep for several seconds. These people may look awake, their eyes are open, but their brain is asleep. They can't hear anything around them or see anything. It may only happen for a few seconds, but that's long enough to go through a red light, to drive off the highway, or to hit another car. So those are all immediate day-to-day problems caused by when you're trying to function when you're too tired. But there are also long-term consequences of sleep deprivation, especially to our health. For example, there's a link between lack of sleep and weight gain. Studies show that people who get less sleep are more likely to be overweight. When people are tired, they actually get hungrier and eat more than when they're well rested. They also have more time to eat because they're awake. All this adds up to weight gain. In addition, people who get less sleep are more likely to get sick and to have serious health problems. One study concluded that women who sleep less than 5 hours a night are 40% more likely to have heart problems compared with women who get 8 hours of sleep every night. 40%. That's a much higher risk. The scariest thing about sleep deprivation is that most people don't realize that there are dangers. They continue to go to work when they're tired or to drive a car when they're sleepy. And over time, they may begin to suffer from serious health problems caused by their lack of sleep, but they don't realize the cause. It's clear we need stronger health education programs to teach people about this problem, to make them realize that they should get enough sleep each night. With more sleep, people will do better at school, be safer at work, and they won't have as many car accidents, and they'll be healthier in the long run. Everyone needs this information. And that's what I want to look at next, how to educate people about the problem of sleep deprivation. We'll look at one educational program that was recently started.
Unit 3, Public Health, Sleep, page 28. Talk about the topic, parts A and B.
That lecture was really good, but I missed a few details. Could we compare notes on some things?
Sure.
So, how much sleep does a normal person need? Does anyone have that?
She said 7 to 9 hours, so 8 hours on average, right?
Right. I had a question too. I wrote down, sleep deprivation is a public health issue because it has daily and long-term effects. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. I have that same thing, basically.
So that means it affects the public's health, in other words.
Right. But I think it's also a public health issue because it affects so many people, directly and indirectly.
Oh, good point.
I have a question too. Can anyone explain the connection between sleep and memory?
Yeah, I have that in my notes. This is really interesting to me, that in order for people to remember new information, you have to get a full night's sleep. That sleep consolidates and strengthens our long-term memories.
That means sleep makes our memories stronger.
Well, sleep doesn't seem to make my memory any stronger.
That's because you're sleeping during class.
Oh, ha, ha, ha.
Unit 4, Business, Negotiating for Success, page 33. Build your vocabulary. 1.
I try to avoid having arguments with my coworkers. I change the topic or agree with the person so that we won't argue.
2.
David has a different approach. His way of handling problems is to argue that his idea is right.
3.
We need to get along because a comfortable work environment benefits everyone. People work better when they get along with each other.
4.
My boss blames me because the project isn't finished. She says it's my fault.
5.
I don't think she understands the circumstances. I need to tell her what happened to delay the project.
6.
Before I talk to my boss, I want to confer with my coworker. I want to talk to her to see what she thinks I should do.
7.
David and I have a conflict. We don't agree on how to finish the work.
8.
We are sewing blue jeans, and I'm worried that there isn't enough fabric to finish them.
9.
David wants to use his own technique to finish the work. He thinks his way of doing it will work.
10.
Unfortunately, when I try to talk to him about it, he often interrupts me before I can finish what I'm saying.
11.
I hope we can resolve this problem soon so we don't continue to have a problem.
12.
We need to concentrate on getting the project done. We can't work on anything else until this is finished.
Unit 4, Business, Negotiating for Success, page 35. Try it out.
Now, it's common for people to have strong emotions during a negotiation, but it's important not to let your feelings hurt the negotiation process. Fortunately, there are a few things you can do to deal with feelings in a negotiation. One thing you can do is to tell each other how you feel. Maybe you're feeling nervous or even angry about something. The second thing is to listen. Don't talk or argue, just listen. Finally, show some understanding. For example, you may want to say you're sorry, or just say that you understand how they feel.
Unit 4, Business, Negotiating for Success, pages 36 and 37. Listen for main ideas and listen for details.
Good morning, everybody. Today, I want to talk about negotiation. First, I'd like to talk about why negotiation is so important for business, and then we'll talk about different approaches to negotiation. After that, we'll talk about some techniques for negotiating successfully. So, why are negotiation skills so important? Every time you need to resolve a problem or reach an agreement with other people, you need to be able to negotiate. We need to negotiate every day with our coworkers, our boss, and people from other businesses, right? So negotiating is a skill that you will use often as a professional. And knowing how to negotiate well will help ensure your success in business. The problem is that many people are not very good negotiators. That's because many people perceive only two approaches to negotiation: the hard approach and the soft approach. If you are a hard negotiator, you are concerned with winning, with reaching the decision that is best for you. You are not very concerned about the other person or your relationship with that person. Hard negotiators will concentrate on getting the decision they want. They won't stop until the other person agrees. In the end, hard negotiators may get what they want, but they may hurt their relationship with the other person, and that person may not want to work with them in the future. So in contrast, soft negotiators are more concerned with avoiding conflict, avoiding disagreement. They give in quickly because they don't want to have conflict with the other person. This approach to negotiation isn't good because soft negotiators often agree to decisions that are bad for them or bad for their business. Subsequently, they might be unhappy or disappointed because they believe they've lost the negotiation. So, instead of a hard or soft approach, successful negotiators, like myself, take a win-win approach where there isn't a winner or a loser. In the win-win approach, negotiators try to confer on a decision, to agree on something that benefits both sides involved. They also try to keep a good working relationship with each other so they can continue to work together in the future. So how do you suppose they can do this? How can you negotiate a solution that is a win-win for both people? Well, there are two important techniques that will help you to do this. The first technique is to listen and to understand. To listen and to understand each other's side of the problem. The second technique is to work together to reach a solution that is good for both people. Let's look at an example. Imagine you work for a company that makes clothing. To make your clothing, you need to buy fabric from another company. Now, let's say you like to buy fabric from Joe, because his company makes good fabric and they sell it at a fair price. But recently, you've had a problem. The problem is that Joe's company has been late sending you the fabric that you need. This is causing you problems because then your company can't make your clothing on time. So what should you do? The first thing you need to do is to make sure you understand each other's side of the problem. To do that, you need to listen carefully to each other. So first, you should listen carefully to Joe's side of the problem. Joe might say, "Oh, we're having problems with output because the machines at my company are so old," and so on. Don't interrupt him or talk about your side of the problem. Instead, just listen and make sure you understand him. After you have heard and understood the other person, you should explain your circumstances. When you do, don't blame the other person for the problem. If you blame the person, they may get angry and may not want to talk to you anymore. One way to avoid blaming someone is to use I statements. That means you start sentences with the word I instead of you. So don't say to Joe, "You are causing us problems." That might make Joe angry. Instead, you could say, "I am worried because the fabric is late and we can't make our clothing." This way, you are explaining how you feel and how the problem affects you. Now that you've both listened and explained your sides of the problem, you are ready to find a solution together. This step can be difficult because each person may want a different solution. But instead of arguing for your solution, you should talk about all the possible solutions and then agree on one that is good for both of you. For example, both you and Joe might agree that you will buy some fabric from another company now and some fabric from Joe's company later. In this solution, you both win because you get the fabric you need now and Joe can continue to sell you fabric in the future. So as you can see, if both people in a negotiation try to understand each other and work together, then both of them can win and feel happy with the solution.
Unit 4, Business, Negotiating for Success, page 38. Talk about the topic, parts A and B.
There's a lot of different ways to run a business.
Well, do you guys agree that the win-win approach is best, as compared to the soft or hard approach?
Well, yeah. I think it's important that people listen to each other. They have to try to understand each other. It seems like common sense to me.
Actually, I can't say that I agree with that.
Really? No?
No, we're talking about business. The goal's to make money. To do that, you have to think about yourself.
So you like the hard approach?
Yeah, I guess.
But if you only think about yourself, no one else will want to work with you. You can't make money alone.
But actually, not everyone you negotiate with is going to take a win-win approach. There are a lot of hard business people in the world.
Still, I think you should just keep listening and don't give in. Keep trying to find other solutions. Eventually, the other person will agree if they really want to work with you.
That seems a little soft to me.
Shh.
Unit 5, Art History, Modern Art, page 43. Build your vocabulary.
Kazuo Shiraga, 1924 to present, is an artist from the Gutai art group, which emerged in Japan after World War II. He doesn't paint in the traditional way, with a paintbrush. Instead, he creates his paintings using his hands and feet. He wants to communicate the idea of movement and action in his art.
Leonardo da Vinci, 1452 to 1519, painted one of his most famous paintings, the Mona Lisa, in the early 1500s. It shows the image of a young woman. The portrait represents Lisa Gherardini, the wife of a successful Italian businessman. People liked the painting because it is very realistic. It shows exactly what she looked like. The painting is most famous for Mona Lisa's smile. From any viewpoint, standing in front of the painting or to the side, it looks like Mona Lisa is smiling at you.
In the mid-1800s, Claude Monet, 1840 to 1926, helped develop a new style of painting called Impressionism. Monet is famous for his outdoor scenes of lakes and the ocean. He also painted pictures of common objects, such as fruit and flowers. Other painters in this category included Pierre-Auguste Renoir, Edgar Degas, and Mary Cassatt. Impressionist painters didn't mix colors together. Instead, they made small dots of pure color.
Unit 5, Art History, Modern Art, page 45. Try it out.
Now I'd like to look at more examples. So we have a portrait. What is a portrait exactly? A portrait is a picture of a person. A portrait can be a painting, photograph, or sculpture that shows a person's appearance, what a person looks like. Now, not all paintings with people in them are portraits. You can have a picture with a person in it and it not be a portrait. Instead, a portrait really focuses on the person, makes the person the center of the picture. Are there any questions?
Unit 5, Art History, Modern Art, pages 46 and 47. Listen for main ideas and listen for details.
Hi, everybody. If you remember, in our last class, we looked at a painting, an abstract painting by the Japanese artist Shiraga. Remember that? And a lot of you said, you know, I just don't get it. I just don't get abstract art. Well, don't worry about it. That's a common feeling. Today, we're going to talk some more about abstract art, so hopefully you'll understand it better. But first, we need to define modern art and understand how it's different from traditional art. Then under modern art, we'll define abstract art. And finally, we'll look at two different types of abstract art, okay? So what is modern art? To many art historians, modern art means the new kinds of art that were created in the 20th century, in the 1900s, right? Before 1900, most artists created what we call traditional art. Traditional art is both realistic and representational. Representational means that it represents something from the real world, like a person, an object, or a scene in nature. Traditional art also looks realistic. It looks like the person or thing that it represents. Before photography became common in the late 1800s, artists were asked to create realistic paintings of people, or portraits. These were valued because they preserved a person's image. So, as you can see, it was necessary for artists to have the skills to create realistic works of art. Now, a famous example of a traditional portrait is one by the Spanish artist Pablo Picasso. He painted his mother in 1896 when he was only 15 years old. In this painting, Picasso depicts his mother using realistic details and colors, including the color of her skin, her brown hair, and the white dress she was wearing. But even at the time Picasso painted this portrait, the world was changing very quickly. By 1900, many new inventions and new ideas were emerging, and people were looking to the future. So many artists, including Picasso, wanted to create art that was new, that was different from traditional art. So they started experimenting with new approaches to art. And one of these new approaches was called abstract art. So what exactly is abstract art? Basically, abstract art is art that's not realistic. It doesn't look like anything you see in the real world. There are two main categories of abstract art. The first is representational abstract art. This art represents a person or thing you see in the real world, okay? But we say it is abstract because it doesn't look realistic. It changes the way a person or thing looks. So this is called representational abstract art. In the early 1900s, Picasso started to experiment with representational abstract art. He and other artists developed a kind of art called Cubism. Now, one goal of Cubism was to show something from different viewpoints all at one time. A portrait that Picasso painted of photographer Dora Maar in 1937 demonstrates this style. When you look at this painting called The Portrait of Dora Maar, it looks like Dora has two noses. But in fact, Picasso is presenting two views of Dora's face, one from the side and one from the front. Now, the second category of abstract art is non-representational abstract art. Unlike representational art, non-representational art doesn't represent anything you see in the real world. Instead, it expresses things you can't see, like ideas or feelings. And another name for this kind of art is pure abstraction. Okay? The first artist to create purely abstract art was a Russian painter named Vasily Kandinsky. Kandinsky created his first purely abstract paintings in 1913. In them, he used lines, shapes, and colors to show his feelings. Kandinsky loved music and was even a musician himself. In fact, he said that when he looked at a painting, he could actually hear music, and he wanted to communicate that in his paintings. One of Kandinsky's works is called Contrasting Sounds. In it, you can see different lines, shapes, and colors. To Kandinsky, these represented different feelings. For example, in this painting, the circles are meant to be peaceful shapes, and the contrasting colors, like black and white squares, are meant to represent different sounds, just like in a piece of music. At the time, some people reacted negatively to this art. But after Kandinsky died in 1944, his work continued to have a major influence on other abstract artists who followed him. And we'll talk about that influence and other changes in art history in our next class.
Unit 5, Art History, Modern Art, page 48. Talk about the topic, parts A and B.
You want to know what I think? Of all the art that we've talked about today, Kandinsky's is the best in my opinion. I mean, his style's so much more interesting than traditional art.
I respect your opinion, but I mean, his style is sort of strange. Who can tell what he's painted? I mean, only he knows.
I'm like you. I'm a traditionalist. I prefer that painting by Picasso of his mother, because in that one, you can be sure of what it is.
Does anyone remember, was that one, I don't know how to say it, was it a cubist piece of work? Was it modern art?
No, I have that Picasso was still in his traditional period. It was in the late 1800s.
Oh.
He was just 15 years old.
Well, what do you guys think? Like, okay, traditional is fine, but imagine how boring the art world would be if that's all we had to look at.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't be bored. Maybe I still don't get abstract art, but I mean, do you really hear music when you look at something like Kandinsky's Contrasting Sounds?
I kind of do.
Oh.
Really? I don't know, it does something to me. I don't know how to say it. Is that strange?
No.
No, makes sense.
Kind of. It is.
Unit 6, Technology, Robots, page 53. Build your vocabulary.
In 1769, French inventor Nicolas Cugnot designed the first automobile. This mechanical vehicle was powered by steam. Using Cugnot's drawings, a mechanic named M. Brezin constructed the automobile. It was large enough to carry 4 people and heavy weapons. In 1885, German engineer Gottlieb Daimler designed the first gas engine. Soon after that, other car makers began to make and sell gas-powered cars for personal use. Then, in 1913, American businessman Henry Ford created the first moving assembly line in his car factory. As the car moved along the assembly line, each worker performed only one task, such as attaching a single part. The assembly line had a big impact on industry because companies could produce goods more quickly and cheaply. However, many people say that work on an assembly line is very dull because workers repeat the same task over and over again. In the 1980s, scientists created the first robotic cars. A robotic car can move automatically, without a driver. Scientists have also created airplanes that are controlled by a computer and programmed to fly without a pilot. These aircraft have been used to explore hard-to-reach places. They can take pictures and obtain information about these places. Recently, scientists have begun to develop robotic aircraft that are powered by nuclear energy. These powerful aircraft would be able to stay in the air for months at a time. In the future, robotic vehicles could have a significant impact on travel, exploration, and warfare.
Unit 6, Technology, Robots, page 55. Try it out.
Now I want to talk about a recent robotic car competition. Beginning in 2004, teams of scientists from all over the world have met once a year for a robotic car competition. In this competition, all of the cars are robots, meaning they have no drivers. In 2007, the competition was held in a city where the cars raced for 60 miles over city streets. 35 teams entered cars in the race, hoping to win the $2 million prize for first place. The first-place car traveled at only 14 miles per hour, but still finished about 20 minutes before the second-place car. All right, is everyone with me so far?
Unit 6, Technology, Robots, pages 56 and 57. Listen for main ideas and listen for details.
Okay, let's get started. First, I'd like to review a basic definition of robot. Then we'll look at some examples of robots in history. And finally, we'll look at how robots are being used today. One simple way to define robot is to say it's a machine, a mechanism that can move automatically or by itself. Many people think a robot needs to look or think like a human, but as you'll see in my examples, that's not always true. Sometimes robots look like people, but not always, okay? Now, let's look at some robots through history. You may think that the idea of robots is new, but actually people have imagined robots for a really long time. Thousands of years ago, the ancient Greeks wrote stories about robots. These robots included mechanical people made of gold and tables that could walk around by themselves. Around 400 BCE, that's about 2,400 years ago, a Greek mathematician named Archytas designed and built a real robot, a mechanical bird that he called the pigeon. The pigeon was powered by steam and it could actually fly, though not very far. In 1495, Leonardo da Vinci, the famous Italian artist and inventor, designed the first human-like robot. This robot was a knight. In da Vinci's drawings, the knight could sit up and move its arms and legs and head like a human. However, we don't know if he ever actually constructed this robot. Then, in 1898, Nikola Tesla created the first radio-controlled robot. Tesla was a famous scientist from Croatia who worked on many inventions, including the first radio. His robot was a boat that was powered by a battery. When people first saw Tesla's boat moving by itself, they thought he was controlling it with his mind, but he was actually controlling it with radio signals. Finally, in the late 1940s, something very significant happened: the computer. Since the 1940s, scientists have been able to use computers to make robots that can be programmed, that can be controlled by a computer brain. The first programmable robot was created in 1954 by George Devol. Devol is an American inventor who created some of the first robots to be used in industry, in factories. So today, robots are programmable, they're controlled by computers. And today's robots must be able to do two things in general. First, they have to be able to obtain information from their environment. That means robots need to have senses. They have to be able to see and feel, hear, or even smell and taste things. And then they need to do something with that information. Perform a task like pick up an object and move it. For example, a robot used in a car factory might be programmed by a computer to see a car part in front of it. And then it can pick up that part and connect it to another part of the car. Today, robots do lots of work for people, and most of that work is what we call the 3 Ds: dull, dirty, and dangerous. In other words, most robots do work for people that people don't either want to do or they can't do. The main way that we use robots today is in industry, mostly in factories. And in fact, 90% of the robots in use today are in factories. Now, robots are very useful in factories because they can do work that is very dull, very boring. They can do the same task again and again and again without getting tired or bored. For example, chocolate factory robots pick up chocolates and put them into boxes. It's impossible for a person to do a task like this as well as a robot. I mean, a robot can do this 20,000 times in one 8-hour workday. 20,000 times. I don't think any of us could do that. Robots are also used in industry to perform work that is too dirty or dangerous for humans, such as cleaning up nuclear waste. A second way that robots are used is in exploration. Robots are used to explore and get information from places that are dangerous or impossible for people to visit. For example, robots are used to explore volcanoes, where it's very hot and unsafe, or in Antarctica, where it's very cold. And robots are also very important for exploring other planets like Mars. These exploring robots are able to take pictures and gather information so that we can learn more about these places without actually going there. Robots are also becoming more common for personal use. Many people use robots to vacuum their homes or as toys just to play with. In 2004, about 2 million personal robots were used worldwide, and that number has continued to go up. For instance, the government of South Korea hopes to have a personal robot in every Korean home by the year 2013. And now, scientists are working on robots that can drive our cars for us or take care of us when we are sick or old, or just be our friends. Now that's an interesting thought, isn't it? So that's a brief history of robots and some examples of how we use robots today. For the next time, I'd like you to imagine what kind of robots we'll be using in the future.
Unit 6, Technology, Robots, page 58. Talk about the topic, parts A and B.
So, could we review the basic definition of a robot?
Sure.
Well, there are a lot of different kinds of robots, right? Like those in factories.
Well, right, but now what makes something a robot? You know, like one, it has to be something that's controlled by a computer.
And we learned that a robot has to have senses, you know, like it can feel, like even smell or see.
Yeah, I thought that was so interesting how some robots can even taste.
Yeah.
Right. But the definition is they have to be able to obtain information from the environment.
Through their senses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, what else?
I wrote down that they have to be able to do a job, like pick something up and move it.
That means perform a task.
Task?
Task, T-A-S-K.
Oh, right.
All right, so anything else? No. Great, well that's our basic definition.
All right then. Do you want to move on to talk about the idea of robots for personal use? Like, for example, I think the idea of a robot being used to care for somebody that's old or sick is sad. I think that's really sad. I think a person should do that. You know?
Yeah, I'm with you, but I would love to have my own robot, to clean my room or fix me dinner.
Or take tomorrow's quiz for us.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Unit 7, Media Studies, Video Games, page 63. Build your vocabulary. 1.
The media we use affects us in important ways. It impacts not only what we learn, but also how we think about the world.
2.
Newspapers and other media inform us about current issues. They give us information about topics that are important to us.
3.
Media experts study the effects of using different types of media. They try to find out how we are changed by the media we use.
4.
Researchers need to gather a lot of evidence before making conclusions. They need to gather data and study it carefully to make sure it proves their ideas.
5.
Some television shows contain a lot of shooting and fighting. Most media experts agree that young children shouldn't watch these violent programs.
6.
Many people are concerned that watching programs with shooting and fighting is bad for children. Will it make them become aggressive and try to hurt other children?
7.
Some psychologists study human development from childhood through adulthood.
8.
One way to study growing children is to observe their behavior. Observing children can show us what children do at different ages.
9.
Another way to learn about children is to observe their social interactions. It's important to see how children act when they play with other children.
10.
Intelligence tests are used to measure a child's intellectual abilities. These tests can show a child's ability to think and learn new things.
11.
Some children do poorly on tests because they have short attention spans. They are not able to concentrate long enough to answer the questions correctly. As a result, they get poor grades.
12.
A concern about intelligence tests is that they don't measure all skills. Some worry that certain skills, such as artistic skills, aren't recognized.
Unit 7, Media Studies, Video Games, page 65. Try it out.
Now, there are different points of view on the effects of video games on children. Many critics say that video games have negative effects on children, that they're bad for them. But others feel that video games are not all bad, and that, in fact, games can have positive effects on children and teach them some useful skills. First, let's take a look at the negative effects. One concern is that video games are bad for children's health. This is because to play most games, children sit still and don't get any exercise. On the other hand, research shows that video games are good for children's vision, their ability to see. Video games can also help children develop good hand-eye coordination, the ability to react or respond quickly to something they see. So, we've 2 points of view.
Unit 7, Media Studies, Video Games, pages 66 and 67. Listen for main ideas and listen for details.
In this class, we've already studied a variety of media. And remember, by media, we mean different ways that we communicate, such as newspapers, television, and movies. Today, we're going to talk about another kind of media, electronic games. That is, video and computer games. Let's see a show of hands. How many of you grew up playing these kinds of games on your game systems or computers? All right, then it'll come to no surprise that in the last 30 years, these games have become one of the most popular forms of new media, especially with children. Now, as these games have gotten more popular, some people have become concerned about their effects on children. As a result, in recent years, many studies have been done on the effects of video games. Today, we'll look at some of that research and talk about some of the effects, positive and negative, of video games on the children who play them. But first, how many children do you think play video games? Any idea? Well, one recent survey found that 87% of 8 to 17-year-olds in the U.S. play video games. Pretty common, right? Another study found that 13-year-old boys spend an average of 23 hours a week playing video games, while 13-year-old girls spend about 12 hours a week. That's a lot of time playing games, isn't it? So, as I said, some are concerned about how this affects kids. One of the main concerns is the effect on kids' social development, their ability to get along with other people. Another worry is the effect on their intellectual development, their ability to think and learn. So, let's take a closer look at those two areas. First, social development. We know that interaction with other children is very important for social development. Many people worry that children who play video games a lot are spending too much time alone. Critics say that kids should be playing with other kids, interacting and learning to get along with others. They say that playing video games is antisocial. But research seems to show that the opposite is true, that playing video games often is a social activity. One study found that 60% of game players play with friends. It turns out then that video games may not be as antisocial as some critics thought. Another concern about video games is that a lot of them are violent, and that playing violent games will teach children to be violent. We do know that some popular games contain a lot of violence, like shooting and fighting. For example, Grand Theft Auto is a game that is very well known for its violence. And we also know that children who play violent games are more likely to be aggressive. For example, a study of 13 and 14-year-olds found that those who played violent games were more likely to argue with their teachers and to get into fights. But there really isn't enough proof or evidence to say for sure that video games cause this aggressive behavior, because many of these studies only show a connection between violent games and aggressive behavior. In other words, aggressive kids may choose to play violent games. It's not clear that the games make them aggressive. Okay, those are the social development issues. Now let's look at video games' effect on children's intellectual development. Some argue that because video games are full of action that changes quickly, children don't learn to concentrate on things for very long. They say games cause children to develop short attention spans. Critics also say that many games don't allow children to think creatively, to think of new ideas, because they just follow the story of the video game. They don't make up their own stories. For these reasons, many people are concerned that video games can hurt children's ability to think and learn. And actually, some studies have shown that children who play a lot of video games do have poorer grades in school. However, other research shows that not all video games are bad for children's intellectual development. In fact, good video games can help children learn. This is because children learn best when they're entertained, when they're having fun. Today, many games not only entertain, but also require players to be creative and use problem-solving skills to win the game. Well, as we've learned, there is a lot of disagreement about the effects of video games on children. But it's clear the video games are not going away, so we need to keep creating good video games. Next time, I'd like to talk more about games that are good for children.
Unit 7, Media Studies, Video Games. Page 68. Talk about the topic, Parts A and B.
So, it seems that video games aren't so bad for you.
Wait, I don't think the lecturer said that exactly.
No, she didn't?
No, not exactly. It depends on the game and how much of it you play. Isn't that what she said?
Yeah. Well, I don't play much now, but when I was younger, I used to play for hours every day. And now I consider myself normal.
Well, that's your opinion.
Oh, come on.
So wait, did you say that you played violent video games as a kid? Because I personally don't think parents should let their children play those kinds of games.
No, I agree with you on that. I play mostly sports video games or one of those silly adventure games.
Really, it's unfair to completely blame the video games. I mean, she said the evidence only shows a connection between violent games and aggressive children, but it's not cause and effect, remember?
Wait, can you say that again?
Okay, so there's a connection between violent games and aggressiveness, but it's not cause and effect. Violent games don't cause violent behavior.
Good point. I think a kid's already aggressive, and maybe that's why he or she likes aggressive games.
It's true. It's kind of like that whole expression, what is it, the chicken or the egg?
Hey, chicken and egg. That sounds like a good name for a video game. An educational video game, of course.
Unit 8, Biology, Genetically Modified Food, page 73. Build your vocabulary. 1.
E. coli bacteria are very dangerous. If food has these bacteria on it, people can become very sick or die.
2.
Doctors say we should consume 8 glasses of water each day, including the water in the food we eat and in the things we drink.
3.
Farmers grow crops, such as wheat and corn.
4.
Most strawberry plants grow in warm places. However, scientists want to modify strawberry plants so they can live in cold weather.
5.
The weather this year was normal. We had the usual amount of rain and snow.
6.
I used a pesticide to kill the ants in my kitchen.
7.
When the apples are ready to eat, the farmer picks them from the tree.
8.
The corn grown in the United States is used primarily for feeding animals. Most corn is fed to cows, pigs, and chickens, not people.
9.
We purchase most of our vegetables from local farmers, not a supermarket.
10.
I put the carrots in the refrigerator so they retain their freshness. If I don't, they get soft and don't taste good.
11.
Oceans are one source of fish. Fish farms, lakes, and rivers are others.
12.
My mother gave us vitamins every day. We took vitamin A for healthy eyes and vitamin D for strong bones.
Unit 8, Biology, Genetically Modified Food, page 75. Try it out.
Today, we're going to talk about the genetic modification of food. That's genetic modification. Genetic, genetic modification. Genetic modification is when scientists change the genes inside a living thing, like a plant or animal. These changes make the plant or animal grow in a different way. Another term for this type of food is transgenic food. That's transgenic. Transgenic. Transgenic food. So that's what we're going to look at today. Before we go on, though.
Unit 8, Biology, Genetically Modified Food, pages 76 and 77. Listen for main ideas and listen for details.
All right, my friends. Today we're going to continue with our discussion of genetic modification. Now, does everyone remember our definition? Yes? No? We're not sure. Okay, let's recap. Genetic modification is when we change the genes inside of a living thing to make it grow in a different way. Okay? All right. Today we're going to talk specifically about genetically modified food, or GM food for short. Genetic modification has produced many new possibilities in plant biology. Scientists have been able to create all kinds of new plants, and it's really a very exciting time in this field. But there are some people who are against this practice, and we'll talk more about that later. Right now, we're going to look at 3 types of genetic modification. First, modifications to make food stay fresh longer. Second, modifications to make crops grow better. And third, modifications to make food healthier. Our first example is about a modification made to help food retain freshness longer. It was called the Flavor Saver tomato. That's spelled F-L-A-V-R-S-A-V-R, Flavor Saver. And like the name says, it was supposed to save the flavor of a fresh tomato. It's interesting, actually, because it was the first genetically modified food to be sold in US supermarkets back in 1994. So, why was this tomato created? Well, there's a big problem with growing fruits and vegetables, and that's keeping them fresh. Like tomatoes, after you pick them, they go bad quickly. They get too soft, they don't taste good anymore. Now, the reason the tomato goes bad is because of a special chemical inside the tomato plant. This chemical starts to work after a tomato is picked. It starts making it get soft. Scientists wanted to stop this chemical from working. To do this, they created the Flavor Saver tomato by adding a gene called antisense RNA. That's A-N-T-I-S-E-N-S-E, antisense. This antisense RNA gene stops the chemical that makes tomatoes get soft. The chemical doesn't function, so the tomato stays fresh for a long time, much longer than a normal tomato. But there were some problems with the Flavor Saver tomato. One problem was that people didn't trust this new genetically modified food. They thought it might be unhealthy or even dangerous to eat, so they didn't buy it. Another problem was that, well, people said it just didn't taste very good. At any rate, shoppers didn't purchase the flavor saver, so it wasn't grown anymore after 1997. Our next example is a plant that was developed to grow more easily, a type of corn called Bt corn. That's Bt corn. Now, all farmers have problems with insects eating their crops, and corn farmers have problems with an insect called a root worm. This worm gets inside the corn plant and it eats it, and these worms can kill an entire corn crop. For a long time, the only method for getting rid of these insects was the use of pesticides. But, as you know, pesticides cause problems too, because while they do kill pests, they also can be dangerous to people and the environment. And they're very expensive to use, so it isn't the best solution to the problem. And this is why Bt corn was developed. To make Bt corn, scientists used a common bacteria called the Bt bacteria. This bacteria lives in the ground and makes a natural poison that kills insects. But it doesn't hurt people at all. So scientists added the Bt gene to corn plants, and now when insects consume the plant, they die. But people and animals aren't hurt at all. Now, for farmers, Bt corn is one of the most popular genetically modified crops today. It's grown all over the world, although the corn is used primarily as food for animals. Finally, let's look at a food that's been created to solve a health problem. Millions of people around the world, the poorest people, they don't get enough food with vitamin A. You know, the vitamin in orange foods like carrots and sweet potatoes. And this causes serious health problems. Over 1 million children die each year from a lack of vitamin A, and another 300,000 go blind. So scientists thought if they could add vitamin A to rice, it would help millions of people eat better and live healthier lives. They came up with a new kind of rice with extra vitamin A in it. It's called golden rice. To make golden rice, scientists took a vitamin A gene from a plant, a daffodil, which is a flower, and added this gene to the rice plant. Looking at the rice, it looks just like regular rice, except it has a kind of yellowish orange, golden color, like a carrot. That's the vitamin A gene giving it that orange color. At this point, golden rice is still being studied to make sure it's safe. So it's being grown in a few places as a part of these studies, but we'll have to see if it becomes a common source of vitamin A in the future. So that gives you some ideas of the 3 main reasons why genetically modified plants have been developed. Next time, we're going to look at exactly how this works in more detail.
Unit 8, Biology, Genetically Modified Food. Page 78. Talk about the topic. Parts A and B.
I don't know about everyone else, but I personally don't trust genetically modified foods.
I agree. I don't trust them either. I mean, I won't buy GM foods. In fact, there are a lot of governments that won't even let these foods come into their countries.
That's a strong reaction, in my opinion, don't you think? I mean, look at Bt corn. It takes away the need for pesticides. Isn't that a good thing?
It's so unnatural and it would never happen in nature. What, a gene suddenly in a corn plant and it poisons insects? Come on, it's really strange.
Yeah, and besides, big business is behind all of these products. I mean, they just want to make a lot of money off of all of this.
Exactly.
Actually, I don't disagree with you on that point. I mean, food is a big business. And of course, the food company is trying to make their money on it, right?
Overall, I agree with Kyung. I can't understand why people have such big fears about GM foods. If we can produce healthier foods, why not do it?
Okay, maybe we should just agree to disagree on this one?
Sure.
No problem.
Fine, agreed.
Let's talk about something else.
Let's get back to our notes.
Unit 9, Astronomy, The Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, page 83. Build your vocabulary. 1.
I assume that people will travel to Mars one day. We've already been to the Moon, and I think Mars is next.
2.
There are more than 6.5 billion people alive on Earth today, and that number will continue to grow.
3.
In Morse code, letters are made with a sequence of long and short beeps. For example, the letter A is a short, then long beep.
4.
Earth's galaxy is the Milky Way galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy contains billions of stars and planets, including our solar system.
5.
A few people believe that the rocket was intentionally destroyed. Most people believe it was an accident.
6.
The Milky Way galaxy is about 100,000 light-years wide. It would take 100,000 years for light to travel from one side of the galaxy to the other.
7.
The planet Earth is the third planet from the Sun. It is located between Venus and Mars.
8.
Scientists are taking pictures of the galaxy. This project will take many years.
9.
We can't count the stars in the universe, but scientists can estimate the number.
10.
Astronomers are looking for a signal from space. They are searching for any signs of life.
11.
Some businesses are developing spaceships to take tourists into space.
12.
New technology, such as strong telescopes, has helped us learn more about the universe.
Unit 9, Astronomy, The Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, page 85. Try it out.
Okay, moving on. Scientists at NASA think there could be water on the planet Mars. A spaceship flying around Mars took pictures of the planet. The pictures show marks on the planet that look like dry rivers. Now, we don't know how old the rivers are. They could be only a few hundred years old, or they could be millions of years old. However, if there were water, it seems very probable that there was some kind of life on Mars at one time. But we assume that there is no life there now. Let's see, now, how many of you...
Unit 9, Astronomy, The Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, pages 86 and 87. Listen for main ideas and listen for details.
Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about one of my favourite areas of research, the SETI project, or the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. The SETI project is a worldwide effort by scientists to look for signals from other intelligent beings in the universe. And it's fascinating to me because the project explores what people have always wondered. Is there anyone else out there? And if so, are they trying to communicate with us? I'd like to examine this more closely, and I'm going to start with a couple of questions. First, why do so many of us assume that there are other intelligent beings in the universe? And second, if there really are, how can we find them? Let's talk first about this assumption that there must be intelligent life. Is there anyone else out there? Well, first let's think about our planet Earth. We have life on this planet because we have the right conditions. We have sun that gives us heat, and we have water, which every living being requires, and as a result, over a long time, intelligent life has developed here, although sometimes we don't seem all that intelligent. Anyway, now think of all the stars in the night sky. Each star that you see could be a sun like our sun, with planets around it. In our galaxy, the Milky Way, there are an estimated 200 billion stars, at least. 200 billion! Wow! And throughout the universe, which is all of outer space, there are at least 100 billion other galaxies. You do the math. That's billions and billions of stars. And maybe one of those stars somewhere in another galaxy is like our sun. And maybe that sun has a planet like our Earth, with the right conditions for life to develop. Right? And maybe intelligent life has developed, and those beings, just like us, are wondering, is there anyone out there? So, this is really an assumption about numbers. With the huge number of stars in the universe, it seems very probable, very likely, that somewhere out there, there is other intelligent life. But then, the next question is, if there are these intelligent beings out there, how are they going to communicate with us? In popular culture, in movies and TV, the aliens always arrive in a spaceship, right? But actually, that would be very difficult. For one thing, the universe is really, really big, and spaceships just don't travel very fast. Take, for example, the star Alpha Centauri in the Milky Way. It's 4.2 light years away. If we used our fastest rockets, it would take us 60,000 years to reach Alpha Centauri. Who's got that kind of time? So, travelling here by spaceship would take way too long. But think about it. When you want to visit someone far away, do you just jump in a plane and fly over there? No, you email or you text them. You give them a call first, right? Or don't you? So, it makes much more sense. If these aliens want to communicate, they won't just travel all the way here to Earth. They'll give us a call first. So, assuming that there are intelligent beings out there trying to communicate with us, trying to give us a call, how do we look for their signal? What do we look for? Well, the SETI search looks for radio signals coming from outer space. They use large radio telescopes located all over the world to listen for these signals. These telescopes look like big, round dishes and work like a big, giant ear, listening to signals from outer space. So we are making another assumption here, that the aliens will communicate with us by radio signals. Okay, but why radio signals? First, because the technology to make radio signals is not very complicated. We've had radio signal technology for more than 100 years. So we're assuming that other beings probably have this technology as well. Second, there's the speed of radio signals. They travel at the fastest speed in the universe, the speed of light. So imagine this. If radio signals were sent from Alpha Centauri, they'd get here in almost 4 years, and that's a lot faster than the 60,000 years a spaceship would take. So, okay. We have these radio telescopes and we're listening. But what are we listening for? I mean, are we waiting for the aliens to send a voicemail saying, you know, hello, anybody home? Well, no. We're not listening for something like that. We aren't even listening for words or language. Instead, we're looking for a very strong signal that stands out and that is different from other signals in space. It has a series or a sequence of signals showing some kind of order. We assume that if a signal is very strong and in a series or a sequence, that it's being sent intentionally, sent by someone. Then we'll pay attention and we'll listen some more and try and find out who is sending it and what it means. Now here's really something to think about. What happens if we find a signal that we think is from aliens? This is something the scientists at the SETI project have planned for.
Unit 9, Astronomy, The Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, page 88. Talk about the topic, parts A and B.
Hey, let's imagine we've received a signal from aliens.
It's so cool.
What happens next? Think about it. I mean, it would really change all of our lives, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no doubt about it. How exciting.
and scary to discover extraterrestrial life.
Well, what would happen if they did make contact? Would we signal back to them?
Well, yes, of course. If we didn't, they'd just think nobody's home and contact another planet.
Excuse me, but I have difficulty believing that aliens exist. I mean, they would have contacted us by now, right?
Well, maybe they've tried and we just haven't been able to read their signals.
I suppose that's a possibility.
Actually, I believe it's already happened. In fact, you heard about that spaceship crash that happened in Roswell, New Mexico, right?
That's a good story.
Some people believe aliens landed in a small town in southwestern United States in the late 1940s.
What? You don't believe that, do you? Why would you believe that?
I read it on the internet.
You know, you can't believe everything you read on the internet.
But this blogger cited Wikipedia.